Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, everyone. It is Marcie Thomas, founder of Brown Girl Collective and Live Well Sister, and I am really excited to be here with you at this time for what's going to be a really wonderful conversation as we dive into what it means to breathe and learn how to practice mindfulness and all these other things that just help us to navigate the world as Black people. So if this is your first time here, you're here at a wonderful time, and just get ready for a wonderful treat. Now, if you had a chance to see the beginning, you can tell that at Live Well Sister, we talk about a lot of different things that pertain to our wellness, and tonight is going to be not an exception to that rule. So we will be discussing Black People Breathe. Can you see that? That's a beautiful book. And as you can see, I'm kind of trying to imitated today by what I'm wearing. So I had to put that on so that we can see the beautiful artwork and all of that. So our guest for this evening is Zee Clarke, who is the founder of Reclaiming Flow, who leverages her toolkit of meditation, breathwork, yoga, and much more to teach people of color how mindfulness can improve their well-being at work and beyond. She has trained Black employees at leading brands like Facebook and the North Face, and she teaches Black people across the nation who have never meditated before how to use mindfulness tools to heal from microaggressions, racism, and the anxiety, fear, and self-doubt that can often occur as a result. And as I've shown you a quick picture of what the book looks like, I also have a quick video just so you can see exactly what's inside, because it's a beautiful book. Here we go. So as you can see, it's a beautiful book, and here is the beautiful woman who has created it for us. Welcome to the space, Zee Clarke. Welcome.
So nice to be here, Marcie. Thanks for having me.
Oh, yes. As I mentioned, I'm really excited to have you here. I enjoyed reading the book, and as I mentioned before you came on live, that it's something that I am going to be referring back to over and over again, because the work that you include in it is so important for each and every one of us as we navigate some of the things that we deal with in everyday life.
So important. Because that's the thing. I realized I wasn't the only one experiencing these things, that every Black person in America was experiencing what I was experiencing.
Yeah, so about that, what is it that led you towards getting into this space? Because you didn't necessarily start out doing this type of work, but it's something that, based upon your own experiences, that you were led or felt compelled to embrace for yourself and then share with others.
Yes. Well, what happened was I was Black in America, and sometimes that can affect your mental health and your physical health. So for me, I spent over 20 years working at Fortune 500 companies and startups in Silicon Valley. And during that time, people would say things to me and do things at work that really stung, and over time led me to burnout. I'd show up at a new job and somebody would say, "Hey, are you the new diversity hire?" And I'd be like, that's not what I applied for. Or people would make comments kind of questioning my competence, like I didn't know what I was doing, right? And I have not one but 2 degrees from Harvard. And yet these people are telling me, trying to put me in my place. And so I felt like I needed to work twice as hard just to be treated like everybody else. A lot of us feel that way. I was
Right.
working nights. I was working weekends and ultimately burnout. My physical health started to suffer. I wasn't eating. I wasn't sleeping. I was anxious. And my doctors were like, something's got to change with your stress levels. So I quit my job and I went to India. I joke, I did the Black girl version of eat, pray, love.
Yes.
You know what I mean? I was doing yoga, I was doing all the things, and I've never felt so good in my life. And it was those tools that I started to practice outside of the yoga studio. But when I went back to work, or when the police were spraying tear gas at me for playing the violin in a park, when I would get treated poorly at stores, when people would accuse me of shoplifting. That's why I wrote this book, because these breathing practices saved my life with the police. And these breathing practices saved my job when I just wanted to cuss people out.
I know, girl. I know. Can I call you girl? I know, because I can admit that as I was reading the book, thank God I am no longer in that type of environment work-wise. I work from home and I work for an organization by, for, and about Black women. So that's a blessing. But memories of the things that we deal with in the workplace, but not just in the workplace, in the marketplace, and just as a Black person existing in this world. So I really can appreciate the fact that you took what helped you to heal and learn how to cope and navigate these spaces and decided to share it with others. And I think that's really powerful, because some people, they get theirs and they don't think about what can be beneficial to others. So I think it's really important that you were able to do that. Mm-hmm. Now, with that in mind, of course, you embrace this and these different healing modalities, but sometimes, as Black people, we have feelings or thoughts about yoga and meditation and mindfulness we think is woo-woo, or, whatever the case may be. So talk a little bit about that.
Well, I used to be somebody that said, Black people don't meditate. I grew up in Washington, D.C., okay? There was, back a long time ago, there were no yoga studios in my neighborhood. Since gentrification, that neighborhood now has yoga studios. But when I was growing up, I didn't know anybody that meditated. I didn't know anybody that did yoga. And I thought that was just for white people. I really did. Then I started to explore, because my stress levels started to get bad. And when you get to a point, and don't let yourself get to rock bottom, I got to a rock bottom. It's not fun there. And so these tools started to help me, right? And that's when I went to India, because I wanted to learn from the source. I was tired of white yoga teachers telling me stuff, and I felt like something was lost in translation. That's why I went to India, because here's the thing, white people didn't invent yoga. Brown people invented yoga, right? Mindfulness has been around for years, just because some white men have, by the way, tried to patent breathing practices and mindfulness practices that have been done for thousands of years by people of color, right? That's what I learned, is that this stuff is for us. And not just that, we need it the most. Black people have higher rates of high blood pressure, diabetes. Black women are aging significantly faster than white women. Recent studies show we are struggling. Medical research says that racism is why we have high blood pressure. And racism causes chronic stress, which leads to our higher rates of diabetes, weakened immune system, and all the things that we suffer from. And so that's why it's so important for us to embrace these practices that have been, misappropriated, perhaps, by some. But these practices are for us because we need them, not just for our physical health, but for our mental health.
Right, and that's so true. So I'm thinking what you say about, these are a couple of things. In the book, it focuses a lot on breathing techniques, which we're going to get into some of those here as we move through the conversation. But just thinking about yoga, for specifically how people make it all about the pose and about what your body looks like and what clothes you're wearing and all of these sorts of things that aren't inclusive always of people who look like us. So I love it when I see people who are looking at, the bodies that we come in that don't look the same, and that you don't have to, you can still be a Christian or whatever your belief system is and still learn and gather good things that come from these different practices.
Yes, exactly. That these are for us. There's not like one way. And I think that capitalism and commercialism have transformed yoga and even now the mindfulness world. But here's the thing, these practices, especially breathing is free, y'all. If you are not feeling well, there is a breathing practice. I like to say the breath is like medicine. Just like you take Advil when you have a headache, just like when you take antihistamines, when you have allergies, there is a specific breathing practice that you can do based on how you're feeling, whether you are tired, anxious, frustrated, angry, right? All the things, stressed, right? There is a breathing practice that you can do for free on your own time.
And I love that. And one of the things in the book, you give us a lot of, based upon different circumstances, you break down what some of the different practices that you can do based upon what it is that you're dealing with. So I really love that, because it's not necessarily a one size fits all type of situation. Based upon what you are dealing with, you can go into different types of, things that will help you to navigate or cope with that experience.
Yes. So every chapter in Black People Breathe is something that happens to Black folks, like bearing witness to the assault on Black lives, or safety is a privilege. And I talk about not just safety from the police, but like, y'all, even in the doctor's office, right? Just look at the data and what happens, especially to Black women. 50% of the time, they don't believe our pain, right? And especially Black women in childbirth. I'm not going to go into it, but safety is a privilege. A chapter called Shopping While Black, where I talk about racial profiling, and I share stories from my life of stuff that's happened to me. And then I share breathing practices that I did when the police were harassing me, when somebody, said that I was shoplifting. I have a chapter called RESPECT at work, because we started out talking about how we get treated in the workplace, especially when it's predominantly white environments, right? And so every chapter is something that happens to us. And at the end of the chapter are mindfulness and breathwork practices that you can do when you have those experiences. And so it's kind of like half memoir, half like how-to guide. And then at the end of it, you can just go to, well, what's wrong with me? What am I feeling right now? I'm angry, I'm frustrated, I'm tired. And then I'll be like, go to page 52. There's a technique for you right there. That's why it's not something to just stay on your shelf, right? It's kind of like whenever you need it based on how you're feeling.
Right. And that's what makes the book so powerful. I want to start with what you start with in the book, is the fact that we are dealing with an assault on Black lives. And we know that. It's something that's been going on. And I love the way that you present it, because there are so many things that come across our timelines, across the news, all those sorts of things. And we always have to make a decision when we see these things, because yes, there's a part of us that needs to be knowledgeable and to know what's going on and have the awareness. But then sometimes, and I'm going to admit, I'm one of those people who usually doesn't watch. And but I love how in the book you kind of say, yes, you have that option to watch or not to watch, just depending on who you are, how you feel, or where you are in that space and time. But then if you do decide to watch, there are questions that you said to us that we can ask ourselves to determine that. So just talk a little bit about that, because I thought that was very powerful.
Yes. Well, the first thing is, stuff happens in the news all the time, right? You see a headline, you might want to click on that link and watch a video. And the next thing you know is that you're witnessing a murder, right? That's trauma right there. And we don't think about that in advance because we're just in this digital society of like pings here and there, right? Mindfulness is paying attention in the present moment without judgment and with curiosity. So I invite everybody, when you see those headlines, to pause and ask yourself some questions like, how am I feeling right now? How will watching this impact me? Where am I? And who am I with, right? Like, am I at work with a bunch of white colleagues and I'm going to get traumatized? I'm going to have no one to talk to, right? Or am I at home with my partner who can hug me and we can comfort each other, right? Do I have time and space to take care of myself afterwards, right? You're going to watch a thing, it might be traumatizing. You need to heal a little bit. You can't just like have to go to work, have to deal with customers, especially if you're like customer facing, you work in a store, you pick up the phones, right? You like that's you're not going to be in a mindset. And then lastly, what are your reasons for watching? I'm talking about the footage of a police brutality, right? Because maybe, you just said to be informed as one, right? And maybe it might be to respect and honor those that we lost, right? Or understand what the risks are for our family, right? So, you might have a reason and maybe you should watch it. And the answer is yes. But here's the thing. It's okay if the answer is no, I don't want to watch it. But if you do watch it, practicing mindfulness while watching is so important. So paying attention to your body. I say the issues are in the tissues. Something happens, you get like a lump in your throat or that thing in your stomach, right? Or a tightened chest. So pay attention to that because that's you holding the stress in your body. And if you notice it, you can send the breath there to kind of calm yourself. So paying attention to your body, paying attention to your thoughts, like what's happening, and also your emotions. What are you experiencing, right? Like I went to the Elmina slave dungeons in Ghana a year ago, and I shared some video footage of that, which is really, that's real. Like this is where our ancestors were chained, and more than that. I'm not going to go into it, but I invited people to pay attention to where are you feeling this in the body. Because as soon as you can say it out loud, my shoulders are tight. I feel it in my belly, a twisting in my stomach. Just saying it allows it just a little bit of release because you're paying attention to it. Because for me, I used to just ignore all this stuff. That's why I ended up in burnout. That's what happened to me.
Wow. And that is something because my best friend who usually watches, I know she'll say, oh, I felt this or I felt that, in certain situations. And actually I had a guest on Monday where we were talking about some of the things, the trauma that passes down and how we get certain feelings for situations. And I have noticed now, if I'm with other people and we're just hanging out, I don't get this feeling. But like if I go to the beach by myself, there's this feeling that I get, especially on the East Coast and knowing that that's where, I'm in Georgia. So like if I'm at the beaches, I know what happened in those areas. And it's always this feeling that I get, and just paying attention to that. So what I love about what you are offering us that, to pay attention to what's happening, to pay attention to our emotions, but then also to like have exercises where we can breathe through it or we can work through it in a variety of ways.
Yes. And that it's just the idea of prioritizing our own self-care and paying attention to when we need that. That's something that is, that's why I'm sharing it, because it was like such an aha moment for me. Like, I think I lived at a constant state of stress. My shoulders were like this, like up to my ears since I was 8 years old, first day of school at this predominantly white school. I was like, okay, this is my life now. And it wasn't until I got to India and got deep into these practices that I experienced for the first time in my adult life, this sort of like, feeling good in my skin, like trusting my intuition, like feeling good in my body. Like I never felt those things because I just thought that the norm was the stress.
Yes. And that's unfortunate, and just the fact that we deal with it so much in so many different ways. And with that in mind, you and I talked about this a little before, just for everyone who's watching, if you don't mind, just some of the topics we're talking about might be a little stressful just to even hear the conversation. So is this something that we can do even now just to kind of breathe through this process as we're talking about things so people don't feel anxiety just from the conversation?
Yes. I would love to share a breathing practice with everybody here on how to deal with anxiety. Those moments, because even we're talking about police brutality, we're talking about racism in the workplace, and that can cause a lot of like, what ifs in your mind that just go. For me, they just spiral. They're like, what if this happens? What if this happens? So much so that sometimes I just can't fall asleep. You know what I mean? Does that happen to you?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So when that happens, this is the breathing practice that you can do. It's called 4-7-8 breathing. The way it works is we're going to inhale for a count of 4. We're going to hold our breath for a count of 7. And then we're going to exhale for a count of 8. I like to do this breathing in and out through the nose. So you ready?
I'm ready.
So we're
Y'all
gonna
ready to watch it?
Yes. If you're driving, I wouldn't do this while you're driving. Okay. All right. Sitting up straight, shoulders back and down so we can get our full lung capacity. Breathing in and out through the nose. And let's go. Inhale for 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold your breath for 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Exhale for 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Again, inhale for 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold your breath for 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Exhale for 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. One last time. Inhale for 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold your breath for 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Exhale for 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And relax. Let the breath be natural and take a moment and notice how you feel.
Better.
Mm.
Definitely. Yeah. It calms the spirit. It calms the system, and all of those things. So it's good to do that. And that's just one of many ways that you can just kind of slow down and breathe. And like you say, it might stop you from cussing somebody out, or whatever the case may be, as you're dealing with different things that come up.
This breathing practice you can do while lying in bed. So let's say you're just lying in bed and your thoughts keep like, boop, 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 boop. That voice just won't shut up. When that happens, you can just do the breathing practice until you fall asleep. And most likely you will in a few minutes. But this is something that you can't do in the moment when somebody says something that's triggering, right? This is something that you can do afterwards, right? Like in the privacy of your own home. I'd love to share a breathing practice with folks that you can do in the moment. Yes. When somebody says or does something that's triggering. This is like very, very simple. And the way it works is you just take an extra long exhalation. Now, the key to this is to do it silently. Okay. So, because I'm not talking about, okay? No, you know what I mean? No. What I'm saying is, let's say that you are having an argument with a family member, or you are at work and somebody says something that pisses you off, but the environment, you can't, even from my face, you can't tell. I don't know if you can tell us, but like you can always see exactly what I'm thinking on my face to a detriment. You know what I mean? Like, right? And so face, but also the tone. And so what we need to do is calm our nervous system, because when that happens, when someone says something, that's our sympathetic nervous system kicking in. That's our fight or flight or freeze nervous system. And then we might say or do things that might have negative consequences, like we discussed. But doing a breathing practice in the moment can stimulate your parasympathetic nervous system. That's your rest and digest nervous system. That's your ability to be calm so that you can think straight, so that you can interact from your highest self. What's the breathing practice? An extra long exhalation. Everybody, wherever you are in the breath right now, just exhale slowly. And like immediately, like both of our shoulders went down, right? Like that's just what happens. We start to relax a little bit. So that's something that you can do in the moment. And also that breath is the pause between stimulus and response. You see, when we don't have a pause, we might do things that, might not be the best. But if we take that pause, then we can decide. And it doesn't mean that you won't speak up for yourself. It doesn't mean, It's just about delivering your message in a way that it can be received, if that makes sense.
Right. Thank you for that. So there is a distinction between the things that you do when you're on your own and the things that you do like in the moment. Because there's somebody's talking to you, you can't 5, 6, 7, 8. They'll be like, what is going on?
Exactly.
They're like, what is happening here? It's like, you better be glad I'm breathing.
Yes.
I'd be glad that I'm taking a breath. So thank you so much for that. But as you mentioned earlier on, and in the book, you have a really um, um, kind of frustrating story that you tell about an experience in the marketplace, because we know as Black people, when we go into stores,
Mm.
that there are a lot of times, if people don't think that you should be there, if you're in certain neighborhoods or whatever the case may be, especially like you talk about certain areas that are gentrified now, that once upon a time it belonged to us. But now we go into these spaces and it's like we may not be welcomed in certain spaces.
Mm.
So, how is it that you suggest that we deal with people when we're in the marketplace?
Yeah. Well, the story that I tell in the book that you reference, it's in the chapter Shopping While Black. And I tell the story that I was in a grocery store, and I was kind of moving cross country and camping, and my car was filled with a lot of stuff. And a grocery store employee called the police and said that I stole deli meat. Okay. Now, this is relevant because I am a vegan. I wasn't always a vegan. I wasn't always vegan, but now I'm a vegan. I was a vegan then. And so when the police came, and they didn't believe me, even though I had a receipt that said I spent $220 at this grocery store. Okay. I had the receipt. Then they went through every item, in the grocery bags. Great. It was all there. Right. And they were still like, where's the meat? Where's the meat? And then they proceeded to search all of my belongings and my clothes, everything on the concrete ground in the parking lot of the grocery store. And here's the thing. Can you imagine how mad I was?
I was mad reading it.
And so in that moment, I did another practice because the extra long exhale didn't cut it for the hours that I was getting harassed. I did a belly breath. Okay, a belly breath. That is when you just inhale and stick your belly out as big as possible, and exhale, your belly comes towards your spine. In fact, we're just going to do some breathing practices today. Okay, ready? So take, just so you can feel it, take a hand, place it on your belly. Inhale, belly out. Exhale, belly to your spine. Inhale, belly out. Exhale, belly to your spine. So that's like a quick, now you wouldn't have your hand on the belly when you're in front of the cops, obviously. I just did that because it's not natural for us to stick our bellies out like that. We're always taught to suck it in, you know what I mean? It looks skinny. But what I suggest is if you are in a stressful moment and somebody is yelling at you, harassing you, being mean to you, treating you not the way that you should be treated, I invite folks to do that breathing practice, the belly breath, if it's real serious, the extra long exhale, if it's like, just like a little something, right? To calm your nervous system so that then you can respond in ways that get the outcome that you want. So like DC me has some words for these gentlemen policemen. However, the belly breath because can you imagine, like, they're like, meat, and I'm like, vegan, like, I don't know what to tell you, and so I could put on my best code switching voice and say, I'm sorry, officer, I don't know what to tell you. I'm a vegan. Also, you've already checked everything on the receipt, talking in a voice that doesn't make them know how I really feel.
Not give them angry Black woman vibes.
I mean, I got more than that for these people. But I breathe through it. But that's the thing, is that we have the power to self-regulate, and it doesn't mean that we shouldn't be mad. Of course, I'm still mad, to be honest. But what it means is it can get us out of a situation and have the outcome that we want, whether it's keeping our jobs, whether it is getting out of a store without going to jail, right? Like stuff like that. It's really important. And it sucks that we have to do it. And people are like, my problem with the work that you do, which is helping Black people heal from racism, is that you're putting the job on us to do the work and not the white people. And I'm like, no. I mean, the white people need to do the work. I'm just saying we can't wait for them to change because we're dying. We got the high blood pressure. We got the chronic stress. We have all sorts of physical and mental health ailments, and we need to feel better now. That's why I teach what I teach.
Right. And you brought up an important point there is that, this doesn't mean doing these practices doesn't mean that you don't speak up for yourself. Like in the chapter about shopping while Black, you did speak up for yourself, but you didn't react in that moment in a way that could have created a problem for you where you might not be here to talk about it today. Let's just be real about that.
That's real.
Depending on the circumstances, you may not be able to talk about it. So these things are to kind of help you navigate situations, but it doesn't mean, you don't write letters. It doesn't mean you don't go to HR if it's a work thing. It does not mean any of that. It's just that in the moment, because as you say, we are carrying a lot of things in our bodies, and that stress, the body keeps the score, as another book.
Yeah.
Body keeps the score of all of these things that are happening to us. So that's what this is about. It's not saying, oh, well, you just breathe and don't say anything. No, Zee is not saying that.
I'm not saying that.
Let's be clear. So yes, I can appreciate that. But yes, just to understand that sometimes you do have to breathe through it.
Yeah.
And sometimes, it's the things that you say to yourself as well, because it's not, yes, there are a lot of breathing exercises. There's a lot of mindfulness, but there are affirmations that you talk about, the words that you say to yourself when you find yourself in different situations.
Yes, exactly. And speaking of affirmations, that brings me to the topic of imposter syndrome. So I have a chapter on countering imposter syndrome in my book. And affirmations is one of the tools that I share in that chapter, because with all these microaggressions and with things like, you can look at the data, Black women are getting paid the least, right? So we're not getting paid. We're doing the most. I have 2 friends who quit their jobs last year, and Black women. And one of them, she quit her job and they had to hire 2 people to do the jobs that she was doing getting paid one person on a Black woman's salary, right? I had another friend, she quit, 3 people. They had to hire 3 people because she was doing the most. All right. And so here's the thing. If we're doing all this work, we're not getting recognized for it, we're not getting paid for it, it makes sense that we're going to start to doubt ourselves. We apply for jobs, we don't get them because we don't have the tight buddy connections with the, folks in charge, usually white men, right? And so affirmations was so powerful for me in my journey to build up my self-confidence. And I used to think they were cheesy. I was like, affirmations, that's some like Saturday Night Live, like I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and everybody likes me, right? Like I was like, that's not for me. But then my self-esteem was in the gutter. And I was like, I need something. So I started doing research on affirmations. And this is what I found. They are extremely effective, but only if you have certain kind of criteria that a lot of us don't know about, like this: present tense. So a lot of affirmations are in future tense. I will be awesome. You know what I mean? Or whatever it might be. And that has already doubt in the future tense, right? It means it's not certain. So present tense. The other thing is use your name, not I. So a lot of research shows that if you use your I instead of your name, it's like there's ego and you start thinking about the 5-year-old you and your feelings and what if this, what if that. But if you use your name, that is very, very powerful. And then repetition. We all know it took me over 40 years to learn these negative thoughts in my head about why I'm terrible, right? So it's going to take a lot of repetition to retrain myself on the truth. And that's why I put these affirmations in my reminders on my phone, in my calendar, so it just pops up so you can rewire your brain. Those neurotransmitters, they eventually learn. So yeah, affirmations, I'm a huge fan. Y'all should write one and then put it everywhere, especially on digital channels. Or, you could also do your mirror in your bathroom. But I find that like, if it just pops up at a certain time of the day, I'm like, oh yeah, that is right. That is right.
Yeah, I am all that in the bag of chips.
Yes.
But that is something, and I love the idea. I mean, yes, there are all kinds of tools out there that will give you an affirmation, but if you can, personalize it, that definitely makes a difference.
Yes.
It speaks to who you are and, how you feel about yourself.
Yes.
and goes against the things that people will tell you. And as you mentioned in the book, there are a lot of people that deal with imposter syndrome. It's not just Black people, it's not just women. Hey, I mean, yes, Michelle Obama is a Black woman and she has mentioned it, but
Yes.
it's not just a thing about us. It's a thing that a lot of people feel. But I think that there are, because as Black people, just because there's so many isms and things that are on us, it might be a little more amplified within us. Even though we have, like you say, the Harvard degrees, or whatever the credentials are, you're doing all the work, but yet oftentimes made to feel like you're still not good enough.
Exactly, exactly. And that's why we need to be proactive about filling ourselves up. You know what I mean? Like, it is so important. A few of the other tools that I share in that imposter syndrome chapter, it's a framework that I call WebAV. And it's an acronym. W is for welcoming the voice, which is the self-doubt voice. We usually just want to squash it. Shut up, But here's the thing, taking the time, mindfulness, be curious, pay attention. What is this self doubt voice saying? For me, it was, you're going to get fired. Today, you're going to get fired, right? So the E in WebAV is evidence gathering, which is to make a list of evidence that supports that self doubt statement and evidence that disproves it, right? And what you might find when you actually look at evidence, like write it all down, the list that disproves that self doubt statement could be really long. And especially when you ask other people, especially people that like you know what I mean? Like your mom, your partner, and they'll give you facts. They'll give you evidence. It's not just because they favor you, right? It's like, no, these are facts. And you just I don't have the clear enough mind because you're triggered with the self doubt to see the truth. So the E is for evidence gathering in WebAV. The B is for breath work. There's some breathing practices to boost your confidence. The A is for affirmations, and the V is for visualization. Because, for Olympic athletes, research shows that when they visualize their performance in an event versus when they actually do it, it stimulates the same regions in the brain. And so the same applies for us, everything that we do. Let's say you're about to go ask for a promotion or give a presentation at work, or, you know what I mean? You're launching yourself in whatever passion it is that you have. Visualizing yourself doing it can be so powerful. And I have some guided visualization practices on my YouTube channel.
All right. That's wonderful, because it's so true, just to talk yourself through that. And I love affirmations. I love the visualization as well. Just thinking about what does that actually look like, and to see yourself in that space. So I love that. And one of the other things you also talk about, I mean, there's so much. In the workplace, of course, we're dealing with micro and macroaggressions. And one of the things you talk about is being in that space and having your Blackness questioned.
Ooh. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Because you may speak a certain way, or you may have certain interests.
Yes.
And people say, oh, really?
Yes. I mean, I feel like I've heard so many times, well, you're not black, or you're not really black. And I'm like, excuse you? What and what do you mean exactly? Curious. What do you mean exactly? Like, I'm twitching.
Right. Like, breathe.
And it's usually like they don't know how to respond because they just got caught up in their biases. But people will be surprised at things that I do because they'll be like, oh, well, I didn't know that Black people did that, right? Like I do some, I snowboard. I'm into the outdoors, right? And I didn't grow up doing this stuff. I grew up in DC. We didn't do that.
Right.
I didn't. Other people didn't do that. Right. But or they'll just they have these generalizations in their mind of what it means to be Black, and they'll make comments, and it sucks. Like, honestly, it's so annoying that they're constantly, a lot of people, especially for me, I've had these experiences at work. That's where I'm usually surrounded by white people, and comments will get made, and I have to justify my interests or my abilities, right? And almost to the point, I remember a comment, when I see you, I don't see color. And that was supposed to be a compliment, because being Black was like a bad thing. Like, oh, well, no, but you're not, that like they mean that as a compliment, but it's so counter to what I now know is the truth. You know what I mean? Which is that we are beautiful, amazing people. And it is an honor to be a Black person.
Absolutely. I agree with that wholeheartedly. It's one of those things, it's a saying, it's like, as a Black person in certain spaces, we're invisible and highly visible all at the same time. So it's like, you don't see me, but you see me all at the same time, which is a crazy space to be in.
Yes.
Yeah, the minute something goes wrong, Black person. So that's just a really crazy space to be in. And I love the way that you talk about that and how we can navigate through that. I love one of the other things in that chapter is just for us, when we have those questions asked of us, how we can talk about and define what it means to be Black for ourselves and not let someone else. We're not a monolith. We're not all the same.
Yes.
But what does that mean to you?
Yes, exactly. Exactly. What does it mean to you? And we get to define it for ourselves. Nobody has the right to tell us what it means to be us. And guess what? We can be whoever we want to be, right? And we come in all shapes, forms, sizes, interests, right? Like we're all over the place.
Right. And just the power of others. You have a nice list, which I love, which you mentioned a lot of people who are Black, who are very different, but have done a lot of wonderful things that, that we can either admire or, just have a strong love and affinity for. So I love that as well. And while I'm talking about that, some of the people in the book are people that are living, some of the people are not. But you have a program that you're working on that actually taps into our ancestors.
Yes, I do. So there is a breathing practice that I was introduced to, and it allowed me to connect with my great grandmother. So I was in this. So this is a breathing practice inspired by something called holotropic breathwork, which takes you to a psychedelic state without any of the drugs, just through breathing and a curated musical journey. And I met my great grandmother. This woman was talking to me in Spanish, and I'm Jamaican, right? Ancestors Jamaican. This woman's talking to me in Spanish, and I was like, "What is?" And I recognized this face from when I was 5 years old. It was the face in a coffin. But I didn't know, that young, you don't know what you're doing, right? And then, like many, many years later, I see this face come up in this breathing exercise session, and she's talking to me in Spanish, telling me that she's been here the whole time, that she's watching out for me, and that I need to stop worrying. And I cried. And I was like, wow, but I didn't know she was my great grandmother. It was just face in the coffin. So afterwards, I called my aunt and I was like, wait, whose funeral did I go to when I was 5 years old? And she was like, that's my grandmother. That's your great grandmother. She was Cuban. I was like, oh. And so I bring this up to say that this type of breathing, a lot of white people, they're the ones, they did the psychedelic research in the 60s, right? And the music, it's a curated musical journey. The music it doesn't feel like it's for us, I'll just say. Okay. And so I created my own version of this. I call it Roots. And it's a way to connect to your ancestors. All of the music is for us, by us, okay? And it's a certain type of breathing that takes you into your subconscious mind to allow you to receive messages from your ancestors. So like in the last one that I just led, somebody had this problem about work, and then the answer just like came like crystal clear. Other people were hearing different languages, like ancient languages, and not knowing what it was. Like I'm sure they looked it up afterwards, right? And so the next root session is on Sunday, August 27th. Sunday, August 27th. Okay. At 5 p.m. Pacific. So if folks are interested in connecting with your ancestors, connecting with your inner wisdom, I've had creative downloads in this too, where I was like just struggling to come up with something. And then it just came to me all immediately just through breathing. So I invite you to check it out. Go to my website, zeeclarke.com, and you can find out more about Roots on the individuals page. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, because Ironically or not so, on Monday, I interview people who have written fiction. And the
Mm.
book from Monday, it's called Trinity, and we were actually talking about spirit
Mm.
beings and how spirit beings kind of travel through time. And so, yeah, it's not ironic that this happened in the same week.
No, it
But
is not.
my mom and I were having a conversation about
Mm.
that because sometimes when you mention certain things, once again, people go, oh no, oh no. But I mean, the reality of it is that our ancestors are still with us. If
Yes.
you have an ear to hear, they are still speaking to us in a variety of ways. And that, there is wisdom and a whole lot that's tied into that. So I think it's really powerful that you are helping people to navigate that process.
Yes, yes. And someone shared with me that went to our last root session that she was worried about trying this because she thought it might be in contrast to her Christian faith. She went, and afterwards she felt so much peace and she felt so connected. And now she understands that it's actually complementary, because what this sort of breathing does is it just opens you up to listen. To your point, it opens you up to listen to your nana. It opens you up to listen to your great 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 grandfather that might have a message for you, right? But we're just so caught up in this time space reality to open up to actually listen. It's like another way to get there is in dreams, right? People receive a lot of messages in dreams, but you got to be one of those people that remembers your dreams. And this is a
Right.
way where you can bring your mind, you can be conscious while still connecting with your subconscious, which is what happens in your dreams.
Right. I love it. I love it. So as I told you earlier, this timing, sometimes you don't plan a thing, specifically, but things happen for a reason, and the timing of this is just perfect. One of the other things that you talk about in the book is, of course, getting to the whole point of self-love.
Yes.
And really being able to navigate what that means,
Mm.
through a variety of practices. You're dealing with all this stuff out here in the world, the way you're
Mm.
being treated, the things that people are saying to you, all
Yes.
this sort of stuff. You have tools now that you can breathe through it, you can, affirm yourself through it, all of those things. But ultimately, it's a thing of having practices for
Mm.
self-care and self-love.
Yes. Totally. And I feel like sometimes the word self care gets like overused, or people think about it like going to get a massage, right? You say self care and you think about a massage. But what I realized was that self care is just being intentional about things that make me feel good, right? Like, so I have a practice that I recommend in my book, Black People Breathe, called I Feel Restored When. And I
Mm.
invite folks to make a list of all the things that help you to feel restored. I teach workshops at companies. So I teach Black employee resource groups and other folks, but mostly Black employee resource groups at companies. And it's interesting because a lot of folks, they raise their hand and they say, wow, I thought that relieving stress was me having a drink after work, right?
Mm.
But when I made the list, I realized it was like going to the gym or going for a walk or taking a bath, right? Something so simple. And so in that chapter around self-love, I talk about morning and evening routines. You and I were talking a little bit about that before we got on here. But I realized during my burnout period that my routines were terrible. My phone was my alarm clock, and then I'd snooze, 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 then start scroll, scroll, scroll. Then I'd
Talking about me.
and I'm still in bed. Next thing you know, I'm writing a work email and I'm mad about it. And I haven't even brushed my teeth. Like
Yeah.
that's not the best thing. And so I invite everyone to be intentional, to think about, what are your morning and evening routines today? What do you do when you wake up in the morning? What do you do before you go to bed? And then think about, all right, if you were to be intentional, what would you change? I bought an alarm clock. I didn't even know people made those anymore, because I was like, doesn't everybody just use their phone? Like, why do we need an alarm clock, right? But so many things, like drinking water. Now water's the first thing that goes into my body. I set an intention. I love to do a daily check-in. So that's every morning when I wake up, I say, "Good morning, Z. How are you?" And it's just a check-in to be like, "Oh, how am I doing?" And if I'm exhausted, maybe today's not the day that I do all the extra stuff. But
Right.
and if I'm fragile, maybe today's the day that I call my best friend, or
Mm.
I'm ready, I'm energized. All right, today's the day I'm going to do all the things. So being intentional about the morning, but also being intentional about the evening, like screen time before you go to bed, or
Mm.
what time did you eat in contrast to when you went to bed, or is your phone, are you on your phone right before bed? What time are you going to bed every night, right? Is it the same time? Is it a different time? Are you getting enough sleep? We're all different. I'm not going to tell you what your routine should be. I'm just saying use mindfulness. Pay attention to what you do and how you treat yourself. And that will give you a solid foundation to exist in this world, especially as Black people in America with all the stuff coming at us. We're going to just be happier, better, more productive people if we have a self-care foundation so that when the hard stuff happens, we're okay. We're going to be okay.
Yes, and you just talked about me so bad, but but as I mentioned before we came on, just and divine timing is such a thing, because last Friday I was on a Zoom call where we were talking about a lot of these things, and and setting intentions and coming up with a self-care plan, and making sure you're taking breaks throughout the day, all of these sorts of things. And on Sunday, I kid you not, Sunday morning, I sat and I wrote, this is the time I should go to bed. This is the time I should get up. This is what I should do before I go to bed. This is what I should do when I get up. And then I read the book and I'm like, see. So I mean, those things are so powerful, because there are things that we cannot control, like some of the things you talk about in the book. We can't control, the things that are happening out there in the world. We can't control how somebody's going to talk to you in the store, or at the job, or or what's happening in the world around us. We can't control those sorts of things, but we can control how we take care of ourselves.
Yes, exactly. And, there's a mantra that I love, which is today I choose me. And
Mm-hmm.
this one, when I first heard it, really struck a chord because I grew up trained to not do that. Just as the only, I was the only girl, right? I had two brothers. It was always told, well, you have to do this because you're the girl. Like that's just what we do. It was like assumed. And so I always put everyone else first. So much so that now nobody tells me to do that. And I still do it, like it's just, it comes so naturally to us to take care of other people. But they say on an airplane, put your mask on first and then you help other people. But if we're doing the most at work, if we're doing the most at home, then we need to carve out let's do the most for ourselves,
Mm-hmm. And as you're saying that, and even as I was thinking of an intentional routine for myself, I'm like, if I do those things, and I mean, I'll admit it didn't start this week because my mama's coming to visit me in a couple of days, so I've been busy preparing for that, and finishing up things for work and all of that. But next week, once I'm back on my own and into my normalcy, yes, because I'm thinking just the fact of being in this space, or having different ideas that maybe don't come to fruition, that if I am practicing intentional self-care, how much more bandwidth I'll have for some of the things that are like kind of sitting, back here, stuck in the crawl back here. But if I create more time and space for myself, there'll be more bandwidth to do these other things.
Yes, exactly. And things that like maybe want to come out, and we are most creative, right? When we feel good inside, when we have taken care of ourselves. But I want to just share one point that I thought of as you were like, you're talking about me, Z. I want everybody to have compassion for yourselves. It is so easy to just beat ourselves up. There's another thing that I'm not doing right. You know what I mean? I'm doing all these things wrong. But here's the thing. We're all doing great. We really are. And we're doing the best that we can. And of course, we can be intentional about making some changes here and there. But I invite you, Marcie, and everybody to start small. So like, in my book, I list like 10 things, more than that you could do. But choose like 2 of them to start with next week and just get those in the flow. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? And then when you're ready, you're like, okay, I'm going to add one more thing to my routine, right? So don't try to do it all at once, just little by little. Yeah.
Yeah, because that is true. It's things become overwhelming when you try to do too much, and then you end up not doing anything because it becomes overwhelming. So
Mm.
that definitely is good counsel in that regard. And I can really appreciate that. Now, of course, you mentioned the some of the things that you have coming up. Are there any other things that are happening with you, whether it's an online event or programs that you're running yourself that people can, continue to tap into the wonderful work that you're doing with Black
Mm.
People Breathe?
Yes. So a couple things. One, I lead a monthly virtual sound bath. So I do a sound bath with Tibetan singing bowls, these ancient bowls made of 7 metals. And it also allows you to connect with your subconscious. It's really huge for stress relief, but also for strengthening your immune system. And so I do that every month, usually around the last Tuesday of the month. This month in August, it's Tuesday, August 22nd. In the evening. So virtual sound baths, you go to my website, zeeclarke.com, you can find out more about it. Again, this roots ancestral breath work. So the idea that you can get to a psychedelic state without drugs to open up the channels to connect with your ancestors directly. So the next one of those is August 27th. Also, if you work at a big company that has Black employee resource groups, I lead workshops, mindfulness to heal from microaggressions, countering imposter syndrome, building up the courage to ask for a promotion, managing overwhelm, all sorts of stuff. And so you can go to my website, the company's page on zeeclarke.com to learn more about maybe your company bringing me in through their DEI department or the employee resource group. So yeah, those are just some of the things. But if you follow me on social media, you'll be in the know. Join my mailing list on my website. I would love to keep in touch with everyone.
Thank you so much. But your last statement made me think of something just real quick because I know we're almost at time.
Yeah.
But because of some of the things that are happening in the world around us right now,
Mm.
how is that impacting the work that you do? Are people still continuing to embrace the work that you're doing and bringing folks in? Because folks are trying to do away with DEI. Oh, it doesn't matter. We're all the same. Whatever. How is that really impacting the work that you do, and why does that make the work that you do even more important?
Yes. Well, let's start with why it makes the work that I do even more important. If companies are defunding diversity initiatives, that means they're not going to be proactively recruiting us. That means for job like to hire us. So that means they're going to be less of us that are present. If there are less of us that are present, there are less of us that rise up. And if there are less of us that rise up, the rest of us don't get to rise up. It's just it's a trickle down effect. And so that means that the work that I do in the workplace is even more needed. That means that the Black people, Black and brown folks at companies are going to be suffering even more. So if the situation was already not amazing, like it's only going to get worse if companies are financially speaking with their dollar, communicating that they don't value us and that we're not worth investing in. And so with that said, look, I'll say that it depends on the company, right? How it's working and where they are. I was on a call with a bunch of folks that work in DEI and a few of them in the tech industry, and they said they all got laid off recently, or
Mm,
that they're looking for jobs and the jobs are suddenly like there was an open rec and now there isn't one, right?
mm,
And so with that said, look, today I still teach at companies. I'm still doing the work that I'm doing. I can't tell you about tomorrow. I can't tell you in 2024 what companies are going to do. But I will say, look, I speak at Black History Month. They'll always do Black History Month
right.
because that's the box. Check.
Right.
But it is. I'll say it makes me sad. Actually, it makes me really sad. And I'll say those that are speaking up against diversity initiatives, it's like there's so much research already that shows that companies are more profitable, more creative, better problem solvers when you have a diverse group of people with different backgrounds in a room. And so, to those, like, there's a term in the laying off period, there's a term, people call it the survivors. That's the people that are still there. They're still there, but you just have to deal with it. That means you're still dealing with the challenges. To everybody that is still doing the corporate America thing, I invite you to just practice the techniques we shared today, because they will be your lifeline, if things get worse. And I'm not saying that they will. Who knows? But it's so important for us to take care of ourselves. Don't burn yourself out. Don't let them burn yourself out. You make a choice every single day. You can choose what time you stop working. And of course, look, there might be some consequences here and there. I mean, I know we do need to be better than everybody else just to be treated the same.
Right.
But also, is it worth your health? I just read an article about this guy who took a $5,000 pay cut so he could work remotely, so he wouldn't have to deal with the microaggressions at work. What was $5,000 worth to him? His mental health. I invite everybody to prioritize not just your mental health, but your physical health as well. Prioritize you.
Yes. What a perfect way to end. And I wasn't even planning to go there, but it's like, it's just so important, though. Prioritize ourselves, to breathe, to love on ourselves, all of these things. And Zee, I really do appreciate your time, your work. I told you beforehand, I love a good sound bath. So I will definitely be looking for those virtual sound baths. Yes. And once again, here's the beauty. There's one behind you, but here is the book. It's a beautiful book. It's, you saw earlier on. If you didn't, it's wonderfully illustrated. Oh, sorry. Last question.
Yeah.
How did you end up getting what made you decide to have the beautiful illustrations? Because it really is wonderful.
Oh my goodness. Well, I knew that we need to see stuff to really understand it. You know what I mean? And so to have some of the practices actually demonstrated and illustrated is really lovely. But also in books like this, we usually don't see people that look like us. When I first saw these illustrations, y'all, I cried. I had, especially if you haven't been, I did yoga teacher training, all the stuff. I had never seen Black folks in print doing the stuff. And so, it was interesting. A white woman said to me, "Wow, is this what it feels like to look at a book and not see anybody that looks like me?" I was like,
yeah.
So that's what's really just affirming about also these illustrations, is seeing us of all shapes and sizes, us of all ages, doing the practices, because we all need to take care of ourselves.
Right. And it's so beautiful to see that, because that was one of the things that drew me to the book. And like this photo, you even have someone who's differently abled in there. And I love it because that makes it inclusive. Exactly. So I love that. Bravo, Zee, bravo.
Oh, thank you. Well, I hope everybody can get themselves a copy to these tools. I also read the audiobook, and I do some of the practices guided, like the meditations and the breathing. So if you're an audiobook person, check that out.
Well, that's good to hear. That's good to hear. So once again, please follow her on IG, subscribe on the website just to see all of the things that Zee is doing. So if you could just hold on for me, don't hang up. Okay. But just hold on for me. I'm going to announce the next couple of weeks' books. But thank you again for being here. And I look forward to more and more and more from you.
Yes. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. All right. Wasn't that wonderful, everyone? Whether you're watching live or catch the replay, Zee's work the book itself is beautiful. The exercises are wonderful. And it really is a way for us to deal with the things that are going on around us, to be able to just pause and breathe through it, and then just continue to work on making sure that we're right so that we can be healthy and that we can live well, as the name of the show is called. So just by means of what's coming up next week, we will have Ebony Janice with us to talk about her book, All the Black Girls Are Activists. So look for that next week on the 23rd. And then in 2 weeks, We will have with us Chloe Pierre. Actually, she's coming from across the pond in London. So it will be a pre-recorded interview, but we will have it on at the same time that you're accustomed to. It's a Black woman's guide to wellness called Take Care. So look for those things in the next couple of weeks. And as always, I thank you for being here in this space. Please share the videos out. There's so much you can learn from the conversation, but even more so, you pick up a copy of the book. So look forward to seeing you again next week. And in the meantime, please continue to live well. Take care.